Okay. All right. So I know we're already dropping in the chat where everybody's at. I'm going to be moving to LA in 2 weeks. So anybody want to connect, hit me up because I'm going to need all the good spots. I need all the good food spots. That's the first question that I had. I swear I was hearing my grandma in the back of my head when I was thinking of where's all the good food spots? Where do I need to start making a list? I need all the good spots. So definitely connect with me offline on that for sure. But welcome, welcome. I'm super excited and I appreciate the introduction. And I'll just quickly say, first of all, it is such an honor to be in this group tonight. I do not take this work lightly. In coaching, with being an executive coach and coaching groups of women and communities, as well as the one-on-one clients that I work with, I do not take this work lightly. So I am so excited to be with y'all tonight. Literally, I have been looking forward to it because it is so neat to see and just connect with other Latinas in tech. It really is just such a, I think just what we're starting to see happen in the industry and having more Latinas in tech be representational at all different levels is beautiful. So I don't take this work lightly. And again, thank you for having me tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we are gonna jump right into it so that way we can get right into our workshop tonight. But I really wanna keep this very discussion based. I am not a speaker who likes to go through a million different slides and bore you to death. I am very much of a high energy for clients that have worked with me that are part of Latinas Tech. You know, I'm very high energy. I like to make sure that that you're getting out of this a beautiful experience tonight. And so I think the beauty of being in communities like this is that you get to have an opportunity to use this to get to know other people here, use it to connect, use it to get what you need out of this tonight. So I want you to use the chat tonight for sure. And I also want you to drop in the chat just like a thumbs up or a yes. We do this in my cohort programs that I run, but give me a thumbs up yes of like, hey, I am committed to being present right now and receiving. Because I think especially as a Latina and being a first gen, it's every time you think about elevating your career, right? You think about a lot of times you are often the last person that you are taking care of, right? You're taking care of everybody else. You are constantly giving. And a lot of times, let's be honest, we've been conditioned and programmed a lot of times to have a mindset of giving of ourselves and not really opening ourselves up as a vessel to receive what we need. So I want you to do that tonight. Can everybody commit to that? To receive tonight, to be present, to be focused, whatever that looks like for you, because I really want you to take in the juiciness magic that we're going to create tonight. Are you with me all? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Okay, I'm sorry. Anytime I start speaking events or I even start our coaching calls, anybody that's been in our program knows that I like to start with some music, start with some high energy vibes going on because we got to want to make sure that everybody, maybe you had a long day at work and it's time to just kind of take in some goodness. So let me share my screen here and we're going to jump right into our training tonight. And if there's questions, definitely drop them in the chat and we'll make sure that we leave time for questions too, because I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to, anybody can answer or ask any questions so that way I can answer. So let me make sure I can share. Okay, share screen. Okay. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. I'm going to share it right here. Okay. Okay, everybody can see it. Okay, perfect. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about 3 secrets in landing your next 6-figure tech job during a recession. Now, before I dive into the 3 main secrets around this topic. I'm just going to ask this question to the group really quick. What is, when you think of the word recession, when you hear that word, what immediately comes up for you? Let's see what the group's saying. Layoffs, okay, let's keep it coming. Layoffs, jobless, budget, okay, opportunity, low economy, pay cuts, got it, okay, restructure. Okay, so just from that alone, yep, headcount reduction, yep, okay, so just that word alone, me just saying that word recession, it was very interesting to see how the chat immediately tied it to what? There was one person I saw that said opportunity, and a lot of conversations around loss, cutting back. I would say it's safe to say that it seemed like it had more of this, like maybe this uncomfortable, right, feeling or emotion behind that word potentially, right, possibly. Is that fair to say? And the reason why I'm even asking this question is because when you hear that word, just that word alone, see even how even for some of you that are at a desktop right now, or if you're on your phone, like even just pay attention to your physical reaction when you heard that word. Right? And just paying attention, like, how did your body change? What happened? Did your body temperature raise up? Did you all of a sudden start shifting? Did you all of a sudden have other thoughts and questions that you started thinking about just by me saying that word, right? And tense, yep, that's fair. That's so fair. Anxious, eyes wide open, froze, yeah. Now, this is something that I think would be another something to think about around this is that historically, it's a lot of times when we're experiencing those feelings, right? A lot of us, and this is something that, I mean, it's so interesting with leveling up in personal development, you start to learn about what are some of the words that potentially trigger your body, right? Just like physically and even just emotionally, and how you tie certain words just by hearing other phrases or statements. And the reason why I'm even talking about this right now is because pay attention to how your mindset is right now when you hear that word recession. Being mindful of it and building an awareness is going to be very powerful when you start thinking about what's next for you. Because I had one person, I think, that said opportunity, or there was like maybe two or three that said opportunity. And I think it's interesting just to see the dynamic there around the mindset around it, as it feeling more of like a negative thing or something that was a loss or something that felt uncomfortable, right? So let's take a minute here for a second and let's do some work around this. Let's talk a little bit about what are the fears? What's coming up for you? What's coming up? And when you think about the fears that you have right now with thinking about what's next and making a transition during a recession, what are those fears that you're experiencing? You don't have to put them in the chat. If you feel safe and comfortable to put them in the chat, absolutely leverage the chat. But grab a pen and paper and write this down. Maybe it's a notes on your phone. Whatever feels good to you. But I want you to think about that for a second. What's coming up for you? What are some of the fears that you're having, right? And I want you to think about the goal that you have, the goal that you know that you want to do, the beautiful dream that you've been thinking about. Maybe it's to one day own a multi-million-dollar house. Maybe it's to travel internationally. Maybe it's to delegate responsibilities and figuring out different options to buy back your time. Maybe it's to start a business one day. Maybe it's to go to a different team and try something new and different. Or maybe this is the first time that you've even thought about doing tech and you're not even sure if tech is the right place for you and you're still trying to figure that out, right? Whatever next is for you and what you know to be true in your heart and the vision that you've had for yourself, why not? Ask yourself that. Why not? Why not you? right? Even during a recession, why not? And I want you to think about that. This is something that is going to be really fruitful for you to think about, right? This will be very fruitful and supportive for you to think about in terms of the goals that I have for myself, regardless of what might be happening externally that I don't have control over right now. What are some of those, the goals that I know that I've had and the goals that I know I still want to accomplish? Why can't that still happen? Why not? So again, let's go back to the drawing board again. Feel free to pop it in the chat or feel free to pop it down on your notepad or your notepad, whatever. But I want you to think about it. Why not? What's coming up for you? What are some of the, you could say limiting beliefs, you could say fears, you could say the disempowering statements in the coaching industry. We use that word quite a bit. Insert whatever feels good to you here on that. But what other things are coming up for you? And awareness is so powerful. It's so, so powerful. So even just bringing some reflection to the fears that are coming up, right? Okay, so we've got feeling like I'm not qualified, comparison, imposter syndrome, other people probably, yep, skills and knowledge on a specific role, like time is fleeting. Yeah, these are real fears. These are absolutely real. And I just want to hold space and also validate that you are not alone, because I can tell you right now that you will experience these similar, I would say, beliefs, statements, fears, doubts, insert again, whatever feels good to you on this, at all different levels in your career and at all different times of political climates, economic climates, et cetera, et cetera. And as someone who was part of the '08 tech, what happened in tech around in the '08s, and seeing my cousins, one of my cousin, I'll never forget this. So my cousin, he was actually he was a software engineer at Microsoft. And I remember, I love sharing this story because I remember my family, we're all immigrants, we're all immigrants from, a lot of us are immigrants from Mexico, right? And so the mindset around, wait a second, why would you go from something that feels stable to not stable? So the company that he decided to go to, and everybody had opinions about it, and everybody, like all my tias had opinions about, everybody had opinions about it, right? And the company that literally he pivoted to was Tesla. He was one of the first engineers at Tesla. Okay. And the reason why I'm saying this story right now is because that was during a time where there was a lot of shifting happening in the political climates. There was a lot of shift that was happening in so many different external factors economically, right? So in the tech industry, it is what we just went through around the pandemic, that's not normal, right? We don't just go through pandemics every couple, years, like that's not normal. And right, there's always going to be shifts that cause the market to change, and it causes tech companies to pivot and make changes as business needs change. So what I'm saying is that the fears that you're having, very real fears, absolutely validate that as your coach today, absolutely validate that for you. And also realize that a recession, maybe that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing for you. And when I say a bad thing, meaning doesn't necessarily have to have that meaning to it. Maybe this is a season of reflection. Maybe this is a season of redirection. Maybe this is a season to look at some of the fears that have held you back in the past, and how can we shift and adapt during this economic season of redirection, right? And so number one, I would love for you to take this as a tool in your tool bag, because this is going to come up for you at every level in your career, regardless if you decide you're going to stay doing the role that you're in now, whether you're in tech, not in tech, whether you are doing your first management role in technology, whether you're doing your first executive role, whatever level you're at right now, or maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to have a side service-based business or consulting business one day, or maybe you want to do content creation, whatever it might be for you, right? Or a product or some type of business outside of your corporate role, whatever it might be. Again, I want you to start thinking about that, because that's really, really important, because as you have shifts in your development, there's going to be fears that are going to require you to look at them differently. I'll pause there. What's been the takeaway of what we just talked about so far around fears? I just want to do like a quick check in the chat. What's been most eye-opening about what we just talked about right now? I like how this idea is reframed, makes me feel like I have more control. Absolutely. Yeah, that's fair to want control. It's so fair. Fears are not necessarily truth. Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes I've heard before is, feelings aren't facts, right? Like, feelings are normal. And that's something I'm learning in a season right now, that I'm in the season that I'm in right now and where I'm at in my career with being in the tech industry. That's something I've also had to really look at, of being a founder and having an online presence and a brand, and also building a coaching, like building a team of coaches and also doing tech consulting. Like in this new season of my life, I've now had to shift into looking at things differently, because that's what's required of me to continue to grow. You see the difference there, right? So these are going to keep coming up. Okay, so let's go into our next nugget here around the 3 secrets to building not only a wealthy mindset during a recession when you're thinking about getting your next role in technology, regardless if it's your first time in tech or you've been in the tech industry and you really want to get to that 6-figure mark, or you want to look at looking at how you want to even create a pathway for that, right? So maybe even if you're not at 6 figures right now, but what's an action plan you can start to put together to get to that, whether it's an internal promotion, whether it's breaking into a completely new industry, whether it's getting your resume ready to go and really starting to do the work behind that to make an external pivot, whatever that might be for you. Let's start to explore. So let's start to build some curiosity back into your career. Let's be honest. When's the last time you actually got curious about what you wanted to do? Like, you remember the question when you were little, what do you want to be when you grow up? Remember when you used to be asked that? Or maybe that was something you read in a book, or like you saw it on TV or in a movie, and you're like, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? That's a very childlike question almost, and it's also very profound at the same time too, right? Being curious about what you really want to do next, that takes work. That takes shifting programming and a perspective. That requires a new level of, has anybody heard of the term or has started to do some work around this, around emotional intelligence, right? And really exercising that muscle, right? Exercising that muscle, exercising that leadership, that self-leadership that you are going to want to start building into your career. And I hear this all the time. I was just on one of my coaching calls that I had with my executive group. These are women that are at the C-suite levels. They are either doing consulting work, and they're also running an entire product management team at startups and a lot of big tech brands, right? And what's so fascinating to me is, even at that level, it's so interesting that the number one question that they ask in in our program, the number one question they ask is, what's next? How do I figure out what's next for me? Isn't that fascinating that even at that level, we tend to think, because I heard some comments here about comparison and imposter syndrome and fears, but even where they're at, knowing that there's an economic shift, knowing that there's a recession that's happening, knowing that there's changes in restructuring, they're still thinking about what's next. What's the opportunity for me here? And so that's where we're going to have to really start exercising that self leadership muscle that you have around how do we start thinking in a way that's going to allow me to step into my power, allow me to step into that powerful version that of yourself that you are, and to start stepping into that identity of who do I have to become in order to get to the goals that I really desire. Maybe it's the bigger house, maybe it's being a homeowner, maybe it's, setting up a strategy for building a family, right? Maybe it's traveling more. Let's put some thoughts here in the comments. What are some things that you desire? What are some of the things that you've been wanting to do? Or what are some of those dreams, those visions, those luxuries that you've been wanting to experience that you maybe felt like that was out of reach for you? I'm curious to hear in the comments. Traveling, yes. Okay, have more time off. Purchase a multifamily, okay. Property investment, okay, Kelly, yes. Annabella, travel, write a book. Oil paint, I love it. Going to grad school, retire my parents. Oh, isn't that the dream? I feel like that is really, I definitely resonate with that as well. So I want you to think about that, because that's the shift here. The shift here is, how do we start looking and normalizing in our culture and in our community that it is okay and it is safe to want those goals and those things, that it's not something that needs to necessarily be feared. It's something that we can start to embody. How do you start embodying that now? Maybe that's starting to look at this recession in a way of, how can I look at this as an opportunity for myself, for my family, for the things that matter to me, for my mission, the things that I want to experience in my career with being in tech, and what are the skill sets and experiences and opportunities I can leverage while being in this industry, or whatever you decide is what's next for you, right? And then the last thing that we want to do is intention, right? What is our intention? So we know that we need to identify the fears. We know that we need to get an action plan, right? And we need to start looking at, let's get clear on what's really next for you. Let's build a solid plan and a solid framework for how you're going to make that goal happen, right? Get the support that you need. Shift looking at this recession as an opportunity for pause and reflection and redirection, and an opportunity to put some actions in place. And then the last thing is intention around, how do we start to build that alignment, right? Has anybody, so I love Shark Tank. Does anybody a Shark Tank fan in the community tonight? Anybody love Shark? Okay, good. Okay. I'm talking to my, okay, good. So I love Shark Tank. I love watching. I'm ready for a Latina to be out there representing as a VC, but that's for another day, for another conversation. But I love Shark Tank. So the reason why I have this picture here is because who are the people that, when they go into that Shark Tank, who are the people that get the deals? At the end of the day, who are the people that get the deals? They are the ones that walk into those conversations with some of the most renowned, wealthy very, very, I mean, the entrepreneurs that we know, that we've heard their name, right? Very successful, I think it's safe to say, right? And they go into it with intention. The ones that get the deals are the ones that are being intentional and being focused, right? They're taking a focus in what they are asking for from the sharks. And that's what I need you to do to unlock during this season, during the recession, is how do we start unlocking that? How do we start to get clear on what you want? And how do we start to even narrow it down even more? So there's really big focus areas for you and alignment, and really drilling down what your goal is and getting clear on that. Because when you go into those interviews, when you go into, interviewing it's communication. That's what's happening. It's an energy exchange of communication, right? And it requires you, when you start to get to new levels in your career, regardless of where you're at, maybe you're just starting out, maybe you are at the executive level, whatever level you're at right now, you want to start channeling that alignment and getting focused, because you want to start embracing that genius zone, because all of you have a genius zone. All of you have areas of levels of expertise, and it's about unlocking that and being able to effectively communicate that in an interview is a skill. And for the roles that you want to do next, I would imagine those are going to be roles and opportunities that are going to stretch you, that are going to get you to think differently, which also requires you to stretch yourself and to think differently about your experience and completely start thinking differently about this season that you're in right now, between we're here September to the end of the year, or even early of Q1 of next year, right? It's going to require you to be very, very intentional about, what is my goal? What am I really asking for? And am I being clear in my messaging when I talk to recruiters, when I talk to hiring leaders, when I'm networking? Maybe you haven't started any of that, and that's okay too. And before we even go into applying for jobs online, before we even jump into any of that, are we aligned, and do we have the tools to get aligned? Okay, so that's the next thing in our tool bag that we want to start to unpack. So I'll just give you a quick example of what I'm talking about, just so to bring it into more of that form of being in more of that 3D form. So in our real day-to-day form, if you're in an interview, this is just one of the frameworks, one of the examples we use when I'm coaching with one-on-one clients and in our cohort programs. But one of the things that you want to think about is you're taking your experience, even in how you deliver the messaging of your experience, has to shift and change during shifts in the market in tech. So when you start saying, well, I'm a strong data analyst, okay, that's a fair statement. And how do we start to really create more potent language around that statement when you show up to interviews, when you're applying online, when you're putting together your resume, all of those things that you know have to happen in order to make the shift, right? Right? So the shift here would be something along the lines, and we would even drill this down even more, but just to give high level, an example would be something like, I'm excellent at drilling into the numbers and finding patterns and data that other people miss to drive the business, right? That still needs to be flushed out, probably at least 2 or 3 more times. But do you see where I'm going with this? Is that it's important to get clear and aligned on what value are you bringing to this organization. Because during times of change in the tech industry, during times of pivots, they want to know at the end of the day, how are you coming in and adding value to the business? How are you adding value to the team? Can you quantify that? Is that something that, how do I know you're going to do a good job? Right? So they see all of these things that you've put on your resume, all these wonderful things. And how do I know you're going to do a good job? How do I know? You have to tell the story on that. But in order to tell the story on that, we have to get aligned. We have to get very clear on the vision of where you're going next and why. And we're going to bring that through in your answers so much more fluidly. And it's going to feel easy and not feel hard. How many of you are tired of feeling like it's hard to do interviews? How many of you are tired of the uncomfortable anxiety? I'm tired of doing interviews where I feel like I am just forcing it, or I feel like when I get the opportunity to speak to my experience, I just freeze. Right? You know, you freeze, and like that's very real. And right? And how do we start to bring that confidence back? How do we start to bring that passion? You all have it, right? It's there. It's about unlocking that. And how do you start to build some confidence back into that, and also identify where, maybe even where confidence got lost in translation? Like, where did that happen for you? You know, and that's where I am very much a big advocate for mental health. I'm a big advocate for therapy, life coaching, all those things, right? Absolutely. And there's definitely a space to have guidance in your career and in your professional and personal development as it relates to the strategies and the mindset shifts and the actual plan to get to the next level that you want to be in your career, regardless if you're in tech or not. Maybe your goal is to get into the industry, right? Regardless of where you're at in that season, or maybe you're wanting to go for your first management position or your first promotion, wherever you're at in that, regardless, you're going to need step-by-step guidance on how to start to unlock that, right? So going back to what I was talking about on the examples, just to give you more of like that tangible example, this is another one that I go through with clients as well that have experienced cohorts I've ran, and also, like I said, one-on-one, working one-on-one with clients. But you want to start thinking about your intentions and your alignments around, what business problem do I want to solve next? So maybe that's a question you can write down and think about over this next week, next weekend. Start thinking about, like, what is the next challenge I want to actually do in this next role or this next opportunity? What is something that I want to solve next? What do I want to be a part of? Right? Do you see how all of these questions require you to start to do some internal work on your emotional intelligence in order to step into that version of yourself that you desire next, right? So I'm going to go through this really quickly, and then we'll jump right into a quick assessment just to give you a benchmark of where you're at with all of this. And you're like, hey, I know I want to think about what's next. I want to figure out my job search, or I want to think about my next career pivot, or just in general, what you desire to do next during this time of the market shifting and changing. As you're building a plan for that, let's also look at what would that look like in terms of, how do we go internal and start to work on that emotional intelligence muscle, and also start to bring it out into form of communication, right? So the next time you show up in an interview, the next time you write a resume, the next time you update your LinkedIn. How many of y'all been updating your LinkedIn, right? And thinking about what you want to put next on your LinkedIn and how you want to brand yourself, or even just looking at what companies you want to look at, right? Looking at your experience requires you to look at your experience in a completely different way. So we want to go back to, let's get clear, let's set some intentions, let's set some alignments on that, right? And we also want to start building, how do we start making sure that you're concise in your communication? Raise your hand in the chat if you have a tendency to ramble in interviews, or ramble during your one-on-ones with your leader or presentation. And feel free to be honest if that feels good to you, to be honest about that in the chat. You don't have to, but I'm just saying, how many of you tend to do that? Right? Okay, that's fair. Yep. Okay. So we want to make sure that you're getting to the point and being concise in your communication when you're working with senior stakeholders, when you're working with founders, when you're working with even just peers in the tech and just peers in general in this industry, right? How do you push your idea to the finish line? We got to start working on that muscle. And then we got to build your reps in, right? So how can we start to build some repetition in this, right? How can we start helping you practice this in meetings? How can you start practicing this when you're doing job interviewing, when you are thinking about reaching out to recruiters, or maybe it's just reaching out to your network about your next opportunity? How do we start getting your reps in for that? So that's how we're going to make sure that we have a process to this. So you're not just, deciding, okay, I'm ready to level up, I'm ready to get guidance, I'm ready to invest in myself, I'm ready to really take some actions during this recession, or taking some actions during this change and shift. And how do I actually make that happen? And how is that going to come to form? So we're going to make sure that you get your reps in. Okay, so let's do a quick, I love to do this quick assessment, let's try to just see where we're at today. And you don't have to put it in the chat if you don't feel like it, but if you feel called to put in the chat, absolutely put your score in the chat. So what you'll want to do is, I love how everyone's putting their LinkedIn. Definitely, I need to drop my LinkedIn. I don't know if anyone has my LinkedIn. If you can just drop it in there too, please connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But also with where we're thinking about where you're going next, let's talk about, let's assess ourselves off of these 5. I think these are just really basic questions that everybody, before they start working with me or my team, like we just go through these 5 quick questions just to get a pulse on where you're at today. Okay, so number 1 is, and when I say assessing yourself, you're gonna give yourself a score. So I'm gonna give you 5 questions. Each question is gonna be worth 20 points. So this is gonna be just a holistic out of 100, just to make it easy for round numbers. What is your score out of 100? Okay, so I'm gonna give you these 5 easy questions. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go for this assessment. Just a quick 5 question. Perfect, beautiful. Just wanna make sure everybody's still with me here before we get into questions. So number 1 is, can you honestly answer what you want to do next? Do you know what that is? And I would say, give yourself, out of 20, rank yourself. Where do you feel like you're at on the pendulum with that? 0 being, I like no clue, not even, like haven't even thought about it. 20 is like, yep, I know, I'm clear. I've been clear about this for a long time, just to kind of give you some spectrum on the score here. Okay, so that's number 1. Okay, are you actually clear on what you want to do next? Okay, number 2, do you have an action plan in place to make that happen? Have you set yourself up for success, basically? Okay, and really be honest with yourself on this. 0 being like, there's no action plan, haven't thought about that, haven't got that far yet, Marisella. Haven't got that far, coach. But like, it needs to happen, right? But maybe you just haven't given yourself the opportunity and to create the space to really crystallize what that looks like. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is, do you have the support to make this goal happen? And when I say support group, I mean, like, are you in a community, or are you at least getting some type of mentorship or guidance, or some type of person that you can leverage with on a weekly basis? I want to be clear when I say the cadence, a weekly basis. Because let's be honest, how many times have you thought about a goal or thought about a shift and where you wanted to go next, and it just kind of stays there? It doesn't really get beyond that, right? Like, you have people you can ask to help you, but you just really don't make it that far, because again, you haven't you haven't committed to deciding you're going to do it, right? That's number 3. Number 4 is, when is the last time you invested in yourself? Be honest. And when I say last time, meaning like, has it been a while, or is it something that you are prioritizing in this season to get where you need to go? And when I say invest, I mean investing in all fronts. Maybe it's investing in things and tools and areas of your life that can make this goal happen and make it happen so much more fluidly and easily for you, instead of it always having to be a struggle, right? Because that's a whole nother conversation we can also talk about, is how consistently staying in struggle mode is also something that we have to also shift in how we even approach problems, right? Because there's always going to be problems, there's always going to be challenges, there's always going to be problems to solve. And how do we look at the problem differently? How do we approach it differently? Because the way that you're approaching the problem today in your career should look differently than how you've approached it 10 years ago, right? So that's the 4th one. And then the 5th one is, constantly being in struggle is pretty draining. Absolutely. 100%. That's fair. And number 5 is, if you really are honest with yourself, do you really believe that you can make it happen in the next 3 to 6 months? Like, do you really believe that? And the reason why I'm saying 3 to 6 months is because in tech, especially in tech, you work off of, like, you have your sprints, right? And there have been studies that have been shown that there are certain time limits in how that plays into the factor of whether or not someone accomplishes their goal. So I'm curious to know, in the next 3 to 6 months, do you actually believe that that can happen for you on a scale of 0 to 20? Like, where are you at in that? Are you 0, you're like, I really don't think that can happen for me? And 20 is like, absolutely. If I got a plan in place, if I got the right accountability, the right structure, the right infrastructure to make this happen, the right community, the right, et cetera, if I got the guidance, I know I can make this happen. And the reason why I'm asking this is, check in with yourself on that. Because if you really don't believe that you can actually bring the vision board to life, there's work that needs to be done around that. Right? I'll give you an example. Do we have time, or do you want me to give you an example of what I mean by this? Or should we go right into Q&A? Okay, example. So let's think of something that you thought was so easy to master. Like, it was so easy. Like when you look back at maybe your job that you have now, what just feels super easy? Like, it's just like, oh, I can do that with my eyes closed. It just, like, whatever it might be for you. What's like one thing you do in your job now, or maybe something, whatever that might be. Just think about something. Okay. Now, that one thing, at one point, that thing was hard, right? That one thing took time for you to learn, and maybe you forgot. Maybe you just forgot what it was like to learn something new, or learn something completely outside of your comfort zone, right? Sometimes reflection is really powerful. So go back to the last time that you learned something, and I would say something pretty sizable in your career, like something pretty monumental. Maybe it was like you learned to code. Maybe it was like the first time. Maybe it was, I don't know, like maybe it was something around getting your first corporate job. Maybe it was, let's say, working on, I don't know, certain technology, like whatever it might be for you, right? Whatever that looks like for you. At one point, that was tough. right? That was tough. That was hard to learn, right? And at one point, it required you to lean into outside resources, or to lean into even just being open to receiving help and asking for guidance, or at one point required you to go on the internet and start YouTubing videos or looking at something, right? And starting to really focus yourself on learning this skill. So what I'm saying is that where are you at on that, right? You really believe that you can make it happen? Or is there still resistance around that? And that's where we want to start looking at that too, and building some awareness on that. So that is what I had for y'all tonight. And I want to go right into questions. If you have any questions on working with me or inside of for our 12-week program that we have coming up for our Breaking into Tech, Shifting into a New Role in Tech program, you're welcome to reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Happy to send you our application for that. We close down enrollments this Friday at midnight for that. Or if you're strictly looking for like a one-on-one executive coaching experience, still reach out to me. Absolutely. But what questions does everybody have? This was so insightful. Great. Yes, I'm so glad. What were takeaways? Like, feel free to pop in the chat what were takeaways. This is how we do our cohort inside of my program as well too. So very discussion based when we have our live calls. So if you like this type of experience, you definitely will want to do our cohort experience. If you like more just strictly private conversations, we can absolutely make that happen for you too as well. And if you have questions for me, like, again, find me like Instagram, LinkedIn, like feel free to send me a DM. I'm happy to answer any questions. But any other questions about tonight, about our training tonight, about how you're feeling about this next move for you during this economic shift, this recession, market change, insert whatever word feels comfortable for you. But curious to know if there's any questions from our community today. Let's see. Is your program specifically for people who have no tech skills? It's actually for both. We've had people who were already in the tech industry, but they're looking to make a shift into a different. So for example, like they were doing quality, they wanted to shift into a completely different role. I've worked with people who go from like software development to cybersecurity. So like a lot of times we have people that also are doing that as well. So I hope that's helpful. Any other questions? I'm gonna, I don't know.
Marisela, there's a couple in the Q&A section.
Oh, okay. Okay, here I am. Okay, I clearly, oh, there we go. Q&A, here we go. I'm a current student. Local university. The service industry, how can someone like me prepare for themselves with that tech role? Okay, so there was a question. This actually comes up a lot in our community too, around and it's so interesting, this question around like, how do I make this transition happen? Basically around, so the question is like, I don't have a tech background. I come from the services industry, right? Or if you come from another industry outside of the tech, like how do I prepare to make this shift into tech? This is probably the number one question I always get asked. So this is a really, really good question. And what I would say to you on this is you have to remember where tech is. Tech is a huge industry. Tech is shifting so fast that it's almost, sometimes it feels, even for me, it feels almost impossible to keep up with it because of how fast it's shifting. It's a huge industry and there's so many different areas you can go into that someone that's coming from a service industry, and I would love to know, I would love to have clarity on what specific service industry. But for example, let's say that you come from, I'm just going to use this example, healthcare. Okay, let's say that you're coming from the healthcare industry, you want to make a transition into tech, you're getting, like you said, a UI UX designer, maybe a certification, or you're learning to skill up in other areas. What's so fascinating to me is that there are startups, there are companies that serve products in the healthcare spaces now. And there's more and more and more happening literally all the time. So what I would say to you is, you're looking at your experience in the service industry as a weakness. We need to start shifting you into looking at that as a strength. I'll pause there. I hope that's helpful in terms of, okay, the restaurant industry. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the restaurant industry, look at all the technology that's being used. Look at when you go to restaurants, you know how you do the payment? And now sometimes they don't even have you, especially with COVID, with the pandemic, they don't even have you sometimes pay somebody physically. It's your card on a portal system. Well, that system, right? That's a whole company that makes those, right? Look at DoorDash, look at all the companies that do food delivery to homes and to just food delivery in general. I mean, you have to start really thinking about those industries, because those industries, they love people that understand their customer. And absolutely, you don't have to be technical to transition tech. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a space for everybody in tech. I will preach that to my grave. There is a space for everybody. And it's really important that you get not only guidance, but getting the right guidance, because you can get lost in the sauce in this industry. And then you spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, months and months and months, and you're spinning your wheels because you're not actually understanding, okay, how do I actually start communicating my experience? How do I start taking my job search from super wide to very focused, strategic, intentional, dialed in, right? So that's going to be where I would start. How do you suggest we stand out compared to other candidates? Is it about branding ourselves? Absolutely. This industry is networking. It's digital networking. You're going to have to start shifting into, how do you get in front of people at companies in the industry that you want to be in, and how do you do that in a digital way? Because with companies, more and more companies going to hybrid models, virtual models, completely remote models, all the above, it's going to require you to start putting in the reps in your LinkedIn, and also putting in the reps on building connections in other communities, and start to really even looking at your own personal network in a completely different way. So that's in terms of, it's important to brand yourself, and standing out is also, that's again, going back to the first question, you have to really start to get clear on, what is your brand? What are you communicating to me in an interview that's going to sell me on why should we hire you? Why you and not the other candidate, right? Why should we go with your idea instead of the other candidate's idea? Why, if somebody else comes in as a candidate who might have more reps in technically, but you have more reps than them when it comes to leadership, or you have more reps than them when it comes to maybe your emotional intelligence in working with people and client facing, right? How can you start to really dial that in interviews? It's really getting clear on your brand and your communication. That's how you're going to stand out, especially during these market shifts that are happening. So yes, I agree. We need more Latinas out there. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Okay, so I'm currently taking a cloud certification and have revisited the courses a lot. I want to know if this career is worth getting involved in. I love what it stands for and what it is, but I seek longevity, stability, and growth. Absolutely. Stability is so important in that. I just want to validate you on that stability is 100% a privilege that a lot of our communities did not experience growing up. And when you have a goal to build economic stability, to build, your career development, so you feel more stable in that, those are some real fears and questions. So I want to, again, just validate you on that. And I would love to know, before I even give you tangible thoughts around this, I would love for you to ask yourself, what's causing you to feel like, why not you? Because you sound very clear. You said, I love what it stands for and what it is, but I seek longevity, stability, and growth. Okay, so like, why couldn't you have those things? Who says you can't have those things? What voice is coming up for you on why you can't have those things? Do you see where I'm going with this, on how a lot of exercising these leadership muscles, these self-development leadership muscles, is going to be required during this economic shift and pivot? And as you step more into that wealthy mindset and looking at what's next, right? Were you always as confident and a good speaker? Was it a skill you developed over time? That's a fair question. And again, it's about putting in the reps. Absolutely, putting in the reps. You have to start putting yourself in spaces to get these reps in. If you want to have more confidence in speaking, intentionally putting yourself in spaces to practice and put in those reps is what's going to be required for you to manifest that, right? To create that, right? So you, again, going back to the plan, going back to, what are the fears? What questions do we need to be asking ourselves, getting curious, exploring, and how do we start to get you in alignment with reaching that, right? So how to address employment gaps in interviews. So employment gaps mean different things to different people. So I'm curious to know, my question is, what do you mean specifically around employment gaps? Is it an employment gap around taking time off to be able to have the space to bring in a new family member, however that looked like for you? Was that time to take away? And again, you don't need to put this in the form. I'm just saying that, think about that, because that's also, I think, can also help you shift into how you can confidently talk about this in an interview. And you don't have to share details. Nobody, remember, that's, if it's a personal reason why you had to take time off to take care of a family member, take care of personal matters, you don't need to go into details of that in an interview. And you also don't need to explain to anybody on super highly personal details that are sensitive, right? And I think it's also too in how what is your energy like when you're showing up to explain it? So when you talk about it on a resume, when you talk about it in interviews, when they ask you a question, is it causing you to have a reaction to it, to where you feel like you can't be confident in your decision in that area of your life? There was decisions, I'm sure, that were made, right? And owning those decisions, and also not letting that be something that holds you back, right? If that was a season that you had to take time off, it was a season, and it's okay to not have to over explain yourself on a resume or even in an interview around that. Again, I would love to know more context. It's hard to really answer that in depth, but you can see how deep I can really go with that question. So really, the context of that really does matter.
I think we have time
go
for
ahead.
one more question.
Yeah.
Feel free to pick the one that you prefer on the last three.
I'm a communication specialist. I'm an arts education nonprofit. Okay, so types of tech companies I would be targeting tech companies that have product management as one of their the roles that they have at the company. I would also target people that or companies that are doing innovative initiatives with creators in the social media spaces. Right? I would look at who are they partnering with. I would look at what is their strategy for working with creators. I would be looking at those companies that are doing those things, because not all tech companies are. And I think if you want to be in market leading teams that are doing some really amazing things on social media with the creator economy, I would definitely focus on companies that's their strategic focus. That's one of their areas that they're using to build more brand awareness.
Yep, totally agree. Ed tech and content creator stuff. I think those are definitely the way to go, especially for your niche. So just think about what you can contribute and then sell yourself. But that is it for today. We're over time, but I let it go because, I messed up at the beginning. So thank you so much, Marisella. This has been amazing. Thank you so much to everybody that joined. I think this is the most engaged I've seen people in our community. So this is amazing. So I don't know if it's me, or you, or just like how chill we are here today, but I appreciate you all. And thank you for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your night. Make sure to follow us on all the channels and follow Marisella on all her channels as well. And as I mentioned earlier in the comments, the recording will be available a little bit later, maybe a couple of days. Make sure you create your accounts on our on latinasintech.org and come in. You'll go under My Lit, and then you'll see all the videos on there available once we upload everything. So thank you again. Any last closing comments that you want to share?
I think my last closing comment is, I know there's questions on connecting with me. I dropped my LinkedIn handle there. And I guess my last closing thing too, to just leave with the community, is to just, again, ask that question. Why not? Why not you? Why not? I think that needs to be the theme of this week. Why not?
Think about that commercial of the little girl about the tacos, the taco. I don't even know what it was called, but it's like, ¿por qué no los dos? That's all I remember on the commercial. So yeah, why not you? That's powerful. Definitely.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Bye.
Bye.